Hi folks, welcome back. Okay, so this time around we're going to be painting Rocksteady from Ninja Turtles. Now this guy is by LA Figures, which if you've seen some of my videos you know I do a lot of their models. Now he has been printed in 1/8 scale, so he's around sort of 25 centimeters high. He is not completely glued together, you can see loose arm joints there. I have glued the top section to the bottom section because there was quite a big gap that ran here, so I had to glue those pieces together in order to fill that gap. It's the first time I've really had any sort of gaps like that from LA Figures, so whether it was something the way I printed it, I'm not sure. But he's come out pretty simply and pretty nice. He is completely hollow inside, including the base. I used water washable resin and I printed him on my Elegoo Saturn 2. He has been fully cleaned up, sanded and primered, so obviously black for the base and grey everything else. So I'll just take him apart just to show you the pieces that I have. So obviously we have the sledgehammer, each of the arms. As I say, I've glued these two parts together, so the legs to the torso. And then obviously 2 feet, and then lastly just the base. I think this is going to be a fun one to paint, so let's get cracking. So to help me with the painting, I've put each of the pieces on little sticks where I can. And the first colour I'm going to use is some warm grey from Pro Acryl. And I'm going to paint in all of the skin. Now obviously I used a grey primer originally, so actually I've got a pretty good starting colour, so if I wanted to I could have just built it up from there. But what I want to do is build up from a darker grey. I like to go dark to light, so hence I'm going to go all over the piece with a darker grey, and then we will come back in and start to brighten up that colour. With that first grey applied, I'm now going to start doing some dry brushing. So the first grey I'm going to use is Dawnstone. So this is a medium sort of grey, and I'm just going to cover the entire piece, all the skin, and just start bringing up those details. Now, because he is a sort of a wrinkly rhino man, he has got quite a lot of detail sculpted in, quite a lot of wrinkles and creases, which is perfect for this type of thing. After that dry brush, you can really see the texture of the skin is starting to come out now. So we're going to do a second dry brush, this time using some neutral grey. So this is a little bit lighter than what we just used. And this again, exactly the same process, just cover all over the piece and just gradually build up a bit more colour differentiation. I'm going to start working on his headgear next. So I'm going to take some Death World Forest, which is a kind of an army kind of green, is the best way to describe it. And I'm just going to paint across all of that, apart from the goggles. So I'm going to do those a slightly different colour. To add some depth to that green, I'm going to now put a dark green wash over it using Athenian Camo Shade. And this will just add a bit of depth into those colours. Using some Death Guard green, I'm now going to do a dry brush across all that green. Gunmetal Silver next, and this is for all the silver parts to these goggles. So things like the clips along here. I'm going to do the bottom part of the eye lenses. I'm going to do the top parts in a different colour. So I just want to concentrate on those bits. And also there's a couple of little rivets here and there, so they also need to be silver. Balthasar Gold next, and this is for the tops of the goggles. So get it in focus. So this part's around here. Next it's black, and this is for each of those goggle lenses. Next I'm going to take some Nuln oil, which is a black wash, and I'm going to put this all over those metallics we just painted, as well as the goggle lenses. Continuing with the face, I'm going to take some Screamer Pink from Citadel, and I'm going to paint in the gums. So the gums, there's not a lot of them on show, but there's a little bit in between the teeth. So just a case of going around and picking those out. Now it doesn't matter if I spill paint onto the teeth at this point, because obviously I'm going to paint that later. That is then followed by a wash of Reichland Flesh Shade. Now I'm going to paint the horns and also the hoofs on his feet in the exact same way. First of all, I'm going to base coat it with a couple of coats of Administratum Grey. This is the lightest grey I have, and it is actually quite a thin paint because it's a layer paint, hence why it's going to need at least 2 coats. I'm going to take some Agrax Earthshade, which is a nice brown wash, and I'm going to go all over those horns, making sure that I get into all the little divots and recesses. Try and get a nice even coat. Now this is going to look very dark as it goes on, but I'm going to come back in and we're going to do some dry brushing and lighting this up. I'm now going to do 2 dry brushes across those horns, the first with that Administratum Grey again. And the second dry brush is using some deck tan. I'm going to use Morghast Bone next for the teeth. Now this is just a sort of a bony sand type colour. I'm now going to use a touch of deck tan, which is just an off-white to white in the eyes. I'm going to use a wash of Seraphim Sepia, which is kind of a yellowy, beigey kind of colour, and I'm going to use this and go across the teeth. Okay, so continuing to work down the model, I'm going to start doing the clothing next. So for this I'm going to go with Yellow Ochre as my initial base colour. I'm going to choose the colours more in line with the cartoon. I sort of seem to remember him having a yellow top, so that's what we're going with. Now obviously you have to thin this all paint down, but this is going to be a particularly thin paint anyway because it is a yellow, so it's going to need at least 2 coats. Using some Agrax Earthshade, I'm now just going to shade in the creases that are sort of sculpted into the piece already. So just a couple along here. And across here, for example. So I'm just going to work around the model and just fill these in. I've got my trusty soft pastels out for the next step. I'm just going to take a bit of black pastel and just start working in to the creases around the t-shirt. Mixing deep yellow with some titanium white gives me a nice pale yellow, and I'm going to use that to do a dry brush across all of the top and take advantage of all this texture that we've got here with the sort of the crisscross pattern all across the shirt. So this will just make the yellow slightly paler, which I think is a little bit closer as well to the reference material. For the trousers, I'm going to do a base coat using this wire flesh, which is a nice dark green. Now, for his trousers, I could just keep it green and I could just do exactly what I did with the vest. You know, do some shading, do some dry brushing, and that would look fine. But what I'm actually going to do is try and do a bit of an army pattern. So I'm going to take a few different colours and just basically work in some patterns. So the first colour I'm going to take is a lightish brown. So I'm going to take a sandry dust. Now, I don't think there's any real hard and fast rules to this. You just want to basically make a bit of a squiggly shape. I'm going to try and sort of get a shape that's got fairly rounded sides to it. Now the size of your shapes is entirely up to you. Again, as I say, I don't really think you can go too far wrong with this. There we go, I think that'll do for the first shape. Trick is just to make sure that you've got a good block of colour in there. So I might come back and do a second coat if needs be. And then, yeah, and then just basically look at where you want to place the next one. So maybe somewhere around here. Like so. So I'm going to go around the model and do, well, maybe half a dozen to a dozen of these using this colour. So after the first pass using that brown colour, that's kind of the design I've come with. So just a case of repeating that exact same step. This time I'm going to use Mornfang brown, so a slightly darker brown. And it's just a case of repeating that exact same process, only sort of filling in some of the gaps now. So we can sort of do one over here. Now, with the second step, every now and then it's okay if you overlap that with a colour you've already done. So, for example, let's go here and we can actually start it there. Just fill it in. Okay, so I'm going to go around the rest of the model and I will come back after I've done that. Next up is black. So again, following the exact same process we did before, and just start blocking in little splodges here and there. Next I'm going to take some olive green and do the same process all over again. Now, to bring all those colours together and also add a little bit of definition, I'm going to take some Athenia Camoshade, which is a sort of an army colour dark green wash, and I'm going to literally just cover the entire thing with this, so everything we've just done. Now obviously on the lighter colours like that, it will sort of change the colour slightly darker, but that's okay. It will just blend all these colours together and make them a little bit more natural looking. I'm going to tackle the belts next, so for that I'm going to take some Mornfang brown again, same brown that we used earlier, and just start painting this in. It's then gunmetal silver to paint in the buckle. I'm then going to do a brown wash of Agrax Earthshade over the belt. Then it's Nuln Oil across that silver. That is then followed up with a dry brush of leather brown, just to pick up all the raised parts of the belt. For his sledgehammer, I'm going to use some Mornfang brown to paint in the wooden handle. That is then followed with an all-over shade of Agrax Earthshade. I'm now going to do a dry brush using leather brown all over that wooden handle to sort of bring out the grain. That is then followed by a second dry brush, this time using Baler Brown, which is a slightly lighter brown to what we just used. So it's just a case of picking up a little bit more difference in tone. It's then Lead Belcher for the top of the hammer, or hammer head I should say. Using some Nuln Oil, it's a black wash all over the head of the hammer. And with that wash dry, you can see the hammer is now suitably pitted and dented looking. So what I'm going to do, just to finish this off, I'm going to take a little bit of Runefang steel. Now this is a very shiny silver. And I'm just going to put a little bit on a brush, dab off most of it, and then I'm just going to speckle it around where I want a little bit of highlights here and there, just to sort of give you a slight scratched look. So no need to go too heavy with this. And once you got the right look, then that's the hammer all done. Now turning to the base, I'm going to first of all take some dark grey again from Pro Acryl and do a fairly heavy dry brush across all the side here and on the top, because there's kind of obviously concrete on the top and I guess concrete on the side because it's got rebar going through. But I'll probably do some dry brushing to make the top stand out a bit more so it's not all just one big colour. Now I've obviously sprayed the base black. The reason you do that is because when you do dry brushing, all the shadows and everything will already be filled in. So, you know, across the top there, you've got the line already in there. So that was the reasoning for that. So just a case of doing this heavy dry brush across the whole base. Just so it's not too much grey, because obviously you've got the grey skin of Rocksteady himself, and then all this is going to be grey as well. What I've decided to do is do a dry brush using some Mornfang Brown, just on the bottom sort of section where the rebar's going through. So not too heavy, you'll still see the grey and black coming through, but just to give a slight tonal change. Then gunmetal silver for all of the rebar sticking out. Then using some Nuln Oil, I'm just going to throw this black wash all over those silver parts. Going to take some neutral grey now and do another dry brush all across the top. For the wood, I'm going to use leather brown. It's then a wash of Agrax Earthshade all over those wooden planks. Taking some Baler Brown, I'm then going to do a dry brush across all those wooden planks. Then a second dry brush of that Morecast bone. Going to use that same Morecast bone as a dry brush on the lower section of the concrete. And then a touch of orange as a dry brush on all that rebar. And that is the base all complete. I have obviously stuck a few pads on the bottom just to make sure that it stays stable. So with that done, now I can glue the piece together and I'll come back and show you the final result. So this was a really nice model to paint. I really like this model. I think the design is really, really good. Who wouldn't want a big Rhino Man in your collection? So thank you very much for watching. I hope you learned something or just had a little bit of entertainment if nothing else. And please consider subscribing if you haven't already. And I will see you in the next one. Take care, everyone.